Tears of joy as the South Korean hostages arrive home. But as the missionaries apologize for the trouble they've caused the nation, there's widespread concern over the deal struck with the Taliban. Was it a price worth paying? And what now for missionary work worldwide? This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm Darren Jordan. Well, there's obvious relief at the safe return home of the remaining South Korean hostages. But questions are already being asked. Why did the church ignore the safety warnings and send young, possibly naive volunteers to Afghanistan, a country racked by violence and lawlessness? And should a deal have been done with the Taliban? Well, Ayman Mohideen has this report on the fallout from the hostage crisis.
The world's largest congregation, 750,000 worshippers strong in central Seoul, making this the biggest Christian church in the world. The afternoon service caters especially to Korean youths. Their enthusiasm, their passion, their devotion, all written on their faces. Here at Yodo Full Gospel Church, they learn they must help those in need, to follow God's command and spread the gospel, as their pastor says, to the ends of the earth. Each year, the church sends some 600 missionaries to places like Afghanistan and North Korea. South Korea has one of the highest Christian populations in Asia, and with it comes a missionary zeal. Nearly 17,000 missionaries are sent abroad every year from South Korea, second only behind the United States. But that fervor has recently come under criticism. Dancing carefully around the debate while the hostage crisis unfolded, critics are no longer holding back the punches, expressing anger and disbelief that anyone would think of sending young, possibly naive volunteers to Afghanistan was a good idea. Reverend Chung Soon Park is head of the Korean World Missions Association. He says too often Korean Christians boldly head out with good intentions but ignore local sensitivities.
Korean Christians need to reconsider and reorientate our strategy. In order to achieve our goals, an active dialogue and debate must begin to change our particular Korean Christian values and social environment.
Dr. Cha Pyung-so is a member of SAEMMUL Presbyterian, the same church that sent the hostages to Afghanistan. He went there 2 years ago himself and says it's not about Christianity, but Koreans giving back to the world.
1950 Korean War, our country were ruined. But so many foreign countries helped us to reconstruction, and then our country developed very fast.
But that enthusiasm and faith alone don't guarantee safety, and critics point out that SAEMMUL Presbyterian represents the sort of aggressive evangelism that can be seen in some Korean churches. With a heavy focus on growth and competition, pastors are putting on the pressure to send as many missionaries overseas as possible, duty-bound to pass the Bible's message along. Ayman Mohideen for Inside Story.
Well, joining us to discuss this issue from Cairo, Dr. ZAGHLOUL al-NAJJAR. He's a member of the Supreme Council of Islamic Affairs in Egypt. From Chicago, IBRAHIM Hooper, spokesman for the Council on American Islamic Relations. And on the line from Seoul is Pastor Douglas Shin from the Presbyterian Church in Korea. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Pastor Douglas Shin in Seoul, if I may start with you first. These missionaries travelled to Afghanistan against government advice. Why did the church ignore the warnings, do you think, and send these people to one of the most dangerous countries on the planet?
Well, the church did ignore it, but I think they took it lightly, and it was their mistake. It was a mistake on their part. But this was not the first time that church members went to Afghanistan against the ban on the government part. So they just thought it was a run-of-the-mill case.
Let me stay with you, Pastor Chin, and ask you, what kind of cultural awareness training and familiarization do these people get before they go to hostile environments like Afghanistan?
Well, this particular case, as far as I know, had some training from March till July on the volunteers who would pay for their way. First on the language, a little bit of Dari and Pashtun, and then culture, but not enough on the security measures. And that was the point that everybody was accusing them of.
Ibrahim Hooper in Chicago, let me bring you in here. How prepared do you think these missionaries were going into a country like Afghanistan? I mean, Pastor Chin there in Seoul seems to think they weren't aware of the security situation there.
Well, I think this was not a very smart move on the part of the Korean church. This is a very dangerous country, a very dangerous situation. And while Muslims appreciate a good religious debate, religious dialogue, we're always concerned when you have a nation or an area in which people are suffering tremendously and others go in from a disproportionate power relationship and possibly seek to exploit that situation. So we're always in the Muslim world, there's concern about missionary activities in places where there's tremendous suffering like Afghanistan.
Okay, Dr. ZAGHLOUL Al-NAJJAR in Cairo, let me come to you. You're an active proponent of interfaith dialogue between Christianity and Muslims. I mean, how vulnerable do you think Christian missionaries are in a cross-culture environment like Afghanistan?
I do believe that the activities of Christian missionary works amidst Muslims is illegal, unethical, immoral, irrational, and irrelevant. Illegal because not a single Muslim governor can allow active missionary workers in his own country. And that's why most of the missionary works go under disguise. Unethical because they exploit the needs of people at moments of distress and at moments of crises. And this is immoral, unethical, and inhuman. It's irrational and irrelevant because it does not bear any fruit at all. I have a report within my hands from the Trinity College of Hartford saying that in northern Sudan they worked for 60 years and they got only one single man changing his religion to Christianity, and this man may be somebody under psychological disorder or maybe actually deceiving them and trying to get their support and their help.
Okay,
Another report with me from Orthodox missions among the Muslims says it is widely believed that Muslims do not abandon Islam. So why waste their efforts?
Okay, we'll come back to the ethics of that in just a moment. Let me bring him back Pastor Douglas Shin in Seoul there for a second, because the South Korean government has been accused of paying a huge ransom. 2 of the hostages were killed. South Korea has now agreed to pull out its troops and its missionary workers from the country. Is it a price worth paying, do you think?
Well, if the human lives could be bought for any amount, and especially when all the media pays attention to an incident, and Korea is a relatively wealthy country right now, so I think it was worth, any government would choose the rescue over just delayed agony, no matter how much it cost. And 20 million pounds was acceptable price if it was 20 million pounds.
Ibrahim Hooper in Chicago, will countries like South Korea now have to reassess its missionary work in culturally sensitive areas like Afghanistan?
I think every missionary group should reassess what it's doing in these parts of the world, and again, not use the disproportionate power relationship, because when you come in from a westernized developed country into very poor areas where people are suffering, they don't have housing, they don't have food or anything, you shouldn't use that situation to exploit and to try and seek converts. For example, when the Muslims of America went to the areas devastated by Hurricane Katrina, we stated openly, we're not going to seek to proselytize, we're not going to seek to exploit the suffering of the people of the hurricane-damaged area to win converts. And we hope that people of other faiths adopt that same attitude when they go into areas that are devastated or where people are suffering.
Pastor Douglas Chin, let me get a final thought from you before we leave you. What price has the Christian church in South Korea paid for this failed mission in terms of its integrity, in terms of its trust, and how badly will its missionary work be affected overall, do you think?
Well, I think it will no doubt leave a big scar on the pages of Korea's church history, but all in all, we will actually benefit from it much more than being harmed by it, because in terms of church history, it's just a drop in the bucket, a huge and bloody drop indeed, but the bucket is pretty big too, you know.
Okay. Pastor Douglas Shin, thank you very much for joining us. Well, time for a short break now, but when we come back, did South Korea's churches ignore the danger signs? And will missionaries worldwide have to change the way they work? Stay with us.